So we haven't done this since before the trade deadline, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So I was thinking about doing it, not doing it differently, but I want to hone our categories a little bit, if it's okay with you.
Sure. In what way?
Or hone our tiers, I should say. So we've been doing sometimes we have 6 tiers, sometimes we might have 7 tiers, sometimes I'm been thinking about it. I might want to switch it up again before next time when we do our final ones before going into the playoffs. But I'm thinking about basically, okay, what's happened in the season already has happened. What's done is done. A lot has changed since the beginning of the season. A lot has changed in the last month of the season. And I think we are at the point now where we can begin to say, okay, who are our contenders? Who are our pretenders? And who are our teams that are completely out of it? And while I thought about doing trying to break everybody into 3 tiers, I do want to have 2, let's call them purgatories. A purgatory
fourth
between
tier.
2. One between our contenders and pretenders, and one between our pretenders and our. Can we think of a name for that rhymes with contender and pretender? Offenders.
Wow. Offenders. There you go. That rhymes enough. There you go. I like
Offender
it.
Rhymes with pretender and contender.
Enough. It rhymes enough with it. Yeah. You have to have the pretender. The T comes into play where it has to rhyme, but contender. It's okay. It rhymes enough. Yes. It rhymes enough where the ender is where we're going with this. I digress. I like the tiers you've come up with. I think I was going to ask you this before we started. I feel like we've actually struggled with what the definition of the power rankings are for most of this year.
That's exactly why I thought of this.
So it's good that you did think of it. And I went ahead and did a 30 of my own for once. Now I'm not gonna like interject on like, here's your one, my one. We're not gonna do it that way. I just wanted to see what mine would look like.
Okay.
And I think the point in the season that we're at right now is more of we've had a big enough sample size and we've seen what rosters now look like. And it's more of, we can now get to the point of like game 7s, who's the most likely to win like the last game of the season is more where I went with this. Like, this is now a championship power ranking based off of what you've done so far, what your roster looks like, the injury health of your team, which is where like there's one obvious one whose roster has changed significantly that the Knicks may be playing tonight that should rank really high, but they may not necessarily be number 1 for me and might be for you. The point is, I think we're at the point in the season where your power rankings can reflect who's going to win the championship. If not them, here's number 2. If not them, here's number 3, and so on and so forth. And
yes, completely agree with that. I the one thing I will say, and this was really the impetus towards creating the purgatory tiers.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think of a word, yet another word that rhymes for instead of purgatory. I'll keep dwelling on that. Because I think that there are teams out there, and this more applies to between like the contenders and pretenders than the other part, but who right now, you like, based on the season that they've had and based on how they're playing right now, you cannot in good conscience put them in the top tier. But I want to keep them there because basically, in my mind, if you are not in that second tier, that first purgatory tier, I don't believe you can win the championship. And I don't believe there's anything that could happen that could like get you there. So I do want to have that little extra space to have that discussion about those teams. With all that being said, I think you already gave away the opening. You said who my top team is.
I figured you were going to put Philly. You hinted at it in the pod with Jeremy that who your new favorite is. And I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Well, my thoughts on, I mean, look, they haven't played a whole lot of games with this unit. And quite frankly, I don't even think it matters too much with what they do from now until the end of the regular season. I don't see a team out there that can beat this version of the Sixers if this version of the Sixers is healthy, and properly motivated. I have zero questions about their motivation based purely on the fact that like when Harden first gets someplace, he's gonna give it his all. Like this is where he wanted to go. He's back with his guy with Daryl Morey. He gets to play now with Joel Embiid, who is, you could argue, his ideal partner in crime. And the only question is injury. And listen, Joel Embiid is not hurt right now, and I don't think there's any reason for me to sit here and be like, well, I can't put them number one because Joel Embiid could fall awkwardly like he did against the Knicks the other day. And maybe one time he doesn't get up. That's not enough of a reason for me. And I don't see any team that I can in good conscience be like, no, I like that team over the Sixers in a 7-game series. I just don't see the team. And the only team that and the best argument that I come up with for a team, if said team is fully healthy, no, I won't go there yet. No, because that's not even true. I just don't see an obvious team. I don't see an obvious team. So they're my number one.
So here's where I go rogue here and do something that is very off-brand. Yeah, I've built a couple brands on these Patreon pods, right?
You have.
Very, very pro Warriors, very pro Klay Thompson, very anti Miami Heat.
Yeah.
And right now I have the Miami Heat as my number one team in the power rankings, is where they're a team I actually think could put a fight up against the Sixers in a 7-game series,
Here's my issue with that. I think when push comes to shove, and God, how many talking sports heads have said what I'm about to say over the course of, I don't know how many decades, but like last 5 minutes of a close game, you need a guy who's going to get you a shot. Mm-hmm. And to me, the Sixers have two of the best, or get you a bucket. They have, I think you could argue, the guy who is right now today the best there is at that in Joel Embiid. And then they have another guy who I stopped myself. I was like, they have two of the top 5. Well, if you go back through James Harden's playoff history, they don't have two of the top 5.
No, they don't.
No, they don't. James Harden has not exactly had an illustrious history of coming up big with big moments or big buckets in big moments. That said, this may be crazy of me. I am still willing to give him the benefit of the doubt where that is concerned, purely because we have never seen him with a guy as good as Joel Embiid, other than last season with Durant, and he was not fully healthy. So if Harden is healthy, I'm still going to give the Sixers the edge in that category.
I get why you're doing it, and I don't like, it's not a crazy take after the first 2 games we've seen them play in. I just, like, Benji pointed this out in one of the threads he put. It wasn't an official Knicks film thread, but he just rewatched the Sixers game after all of us and just said, like, Harden's defense is going to be a problem if they face a team that is like actually able to take advantage of open shots and take advantage of him in that way. Then they're going to be outscored, especially if they're not getting the friendly whistle, which usually you don't get in the playoffs, that they got on Sunday. I think here's the other brand that I'm going to try to perfect. My anti-Harden stance on this.
Oh, wow.
Like,
I didn't even know this was a thing.
Well, just like, are we just going to ignore what the past 5 seasons in the postseason has been, or just really since OKC, he had as a 6th man against the Spurs.
I know.
He's like the second reason why the Thunder got to the finals in 2012. So
that's his best playoff performance.
His best. Exactly. So then he gets to the finals. The Heat made a conscious effort, just take Harden out of the equation and we'll let Westbrook think he can beat us. Yeah. And it's why, like, Westbrook having the highest usage in that series is why the Miami Heat won, along with the fact that they had LeBron James in, demigod mode. Since then, since going to Houston, you have a game 6 where he took himself out of the game against the Clippers, and they came back with Jason Terry, Dwight Howard, Josh Smith, and Corey Brewer while James Harden was on the bench. And that's why they won the series. They go on to get swept by the Warriors. The next year, he wins 1 playoff game as an 8th seed, a season he was relatively healthy, the falling out with Dwight Howard. Then the first year of D'Antoni, he's going neck and neck with the Spurs in an overtime, has a chance to win, gets blocked by 38-year-old Manu Ginobili, and then scores 8 points in game 6 at home to be eliminated. The next year is the first year with Chris Paul. And you can say what you want about how like the Warriors were unstoppable that season. No, like they were still great. Don't get me wrong, but let's not pretend like the Rockets didn't have 2 19-point leads in game 6 and 7 after Chris Paul got hurt, and Harden went 2 for 27, or it was something crazy like 5 for 27 in the final 2 games from 3. Then the next year, Kevin Durant gets hurt in game 5. And it's like neck and neck. And it's like, wow, if Harden wants to seize this moment, he's got a chance to get past the Warriors finally. The injury luck is on his side. He loses that 4th quarter against the Warriors. Then he loses game 6 at home because Clay goes off. Like at a certain point, what am I going to be able to say? Like, I trust James Harden to overcome in the playoffs. You can say because Embiid is part of the equation, but I like the Miami Heat, a team that has done it. Bubble aside, I think they can zero in. I think Bam can neutralize Embiid enough to make it Butler versus Harden. And if you're asking me to pick Butler versus Harden, I'm picking Jimmy Butler, a guy that I saw go neck and neck with LeBron James in a finals game.
And I don't think this version of Joel Embiid, I don't think he could be neutralized.
That's fair then.
I think we're looking at 2000 Shaq right now.
So then here's where I'll challenge your brand. Duncan Robinson or Matisse Thybulle?
I don't know that you could go one-on-one with the remaining guys, because I think it's about how well the piece. I don't want to put a kibosh on the back and forth, but like, I think it's about how well the pieces fit together. And I think part of the reason, like, if you're asking me which of those 2 players would I prefer on my team, I would pick Duncan Robinson, because I think elite shooting is a better skill than elite defense. But I think in the context of the Sixers, Thybulle is so game changing for them, because they have Embiid there as the backstop, and to get one guy, that free safety out there. We saw it how many times against the Knicks in the first game they played him, where Thybulle's getting a hand in there and a hand in there. It's like, it's a perfect, but so I'm at the point with Miami Heat where I'm building up my tolerance for another Heat run to the finals. Because as of right now, they've been the most, like the few times I've league passed them, and like the few times they've played the Knicks, I've just been like, this is the most impressive team I've seen when they're healthy. Now, like, there's an injury question with them. Kyle Lowry, obviously, Bam was hurt for parts of the season, but I just think fine. 1 through 8. And there's another aspect here. Who do you trust in a playoff series? If we're gonna go on brand here, you trust Doc or you trust Spoelstra? That's clear. That's Spo.
So that's where I trust Spoelstra to outcoach Doc Rivers, and maybe that's the edge for 4-3. It's why, look, I have the Sixers 2 right now, so it's not like I'm that far off. I just think the Miami Heat have been the most impressive team over the last 3 weeks, especially since Bam came back, and that's more what I'm judging this off of.
I think, considering the injuries that they've had and considering how many guys have missed games, I think the Miami Heat have been the second most impressive team this season to the Phoenix Suns.
Yes.
Who, by the way, until Chris Paul was injured, have had basically, well, no, that's not true, because DeAndre Ayton was out, although I'm not as big a DeAndre Ayton guy as others. Still, so I'll tell you what, I don't know if I was going to put the Heat at number 2. I will put the Heat at number 2. So we have the same top 2.
Yes, just different.
Okay.
Order. Yes,
just a different order. I think all of your arguments are valid. It would not shock me in the least if the Heat ended up in the conference finals. I'm not going to say it would shock me if they beat the Sixers. I would be surprised, though. And honestly, I'd be surprised if the Heat won the championship. I think I would give the West, whoever comes out of the West, a better shot against the Heat than I would against a few other teams in the East.
Fair. Look, the Tyler Hero aspect of it that we all hate because of the RJ comps, but
listen, that guy's not going to be afraid in a big last 5 minutes big playoff game,
especially since we've seen him perform. Like, again, bubble aside, those games mattered.
I don't worry about Tyler. Listen, Tyler Hero is not a reason why he's not a reason I'm lower on the Heat. He's a reason I'm higher on the Heat.
Yeah. Again, I think he neutralizes Maxey in a series like that, where it's like, oh, we have this weapon off the bench, or we have this third guy that can really, be important here. And God help him if if Duncan Robinson decides, I'm just going to not miss threes for 2 games.
It's just not something that happens very often in NBA history, where a team that does not have a, no doubt about it, top, whatever the tier is at that time. I don't put Jimmy Butler in that tier. I put him just below that tier. And it's really rare that a team without a guy in that tier can actually win the whole damn thing. And when it happens, it's like a 2004 Pistons scenario, who, by the way, beat Shaq and Kobe, but like, quite frankly, it was not a good Lakers team. Like,
that Lakers team was also waiting to spontaneously combust when you read Jeff Pearl's book. Yeah.